I'm DumpTruckDS and welcome back to Mapping for Quake. In this episode, we're going to cover a project that I've been working on for a couple of months. It's called Progs Dump, and it's a mod. It's a Quake mod, but it's really a development kit for mappers. So what does this mean? Basically, what you would do is take Progs Dump, download it, and that becomes your mod folder. You can rename it. You should rename it, please. In a nutshell, Progs Dump is a development kit for mappers that really includes some, quality of life kind of features. Basically, you don't need to make closets to spawn your monsters in anymore. You can just basically put your monsters in the map, check a spawn flag, and they'll spawn when you target them. There are custom sounds and custom models. There are new triggers and enhanced platforms. There are a lot of features that really make mapping easier and more powerful. The reason I did this mod is I love vanilla Quake. I like Arcane Dimensions and Quoth and some of these other mods, but they've kind of added too much to it. And so basically what I wanted to do is make a vanilla id1 experience, but with all of these kind of quality of life features that mappers really kind of miss when they're working with vanilla. We can't cover everything in this video, so it's really kind of just an introduction, but without further ado, here we go. So here's the start map for Progs Dump. And we have 4 sample maps in here. This one is by Ionis, and it's a low gravity map. You can go check that out. And this one's by Yoder, and this is more of a puzzle map. Kind of good examples on how to use this for puzzles. This is kind of your basic gameplay and triggering monsters, but there's also a water current that that Ionis has in there. It's kind of deadly, so I definitely check out all 3 of those maps. But we're gonna focus right now on the gallery. You want to explore this a little bit more in detail because I'm just going to touch on a few things in this video. But you basically want to touch all those rune pads to continue on. This first item is a MISC model. So what you do is you figure out the frame number of this animation for the player model, and then you can add him in as this dead body. And that's just one of the many things that you can do with MISC model. And I'll show you how to figure out what frame number is what a little bit later in the video. You can also play ambient sounds. You hear that sound? That's an ambient sound that just plays randomly. I'll show you that in the editor. This is a one-off. This was a play sound triggered, and you can just have, trigger one specific sound. Or you can also do that same thing with a looped sound and turn a loop sound on and off. So you can hear the teleport bong sound there. I'm going to turn it off. Now, just so you know, with that particular item, if you are playing a loop sound, it won't carry over a saved game. So if you trigger a loop sound to play and the player saves and goes back, it will not be triggered again. It's one of the quirks that we've got to figure out how to fix, but for now, that's the limitation of play sound trigger with a looped sound. Now going up here. So I triggered this. This is also MISC model. But these are animation frames, so you can specify a range of animated frames. Right now these are limited, but I'm going to try to get to the mod to where you can trigger these on and off, so I think there's a lot more usage in the future. You can use custom sprites, and you can use built-in sprites. So these are built into the game, but this is an external sprite in the Progs folder. And for anyone who's wondering, that's from Hexen. I think it's from Hexen, if I'm not mistaken. I borrowed it. I couldn't make one myself that looked any good, so I just had to fall back on this guy for now. But I plan on making some new sprites for the mod. Now, one of the most popular and requested features of any mod is trigger spawn monsters. There's a couple different ways to refer to them. I call them trigger spawned monsters. You put a monster in the level and you trigger it to spawn it. And this avoids having to use teleport destinations and trigger teleports with, little closets outside of your map. It's really handy. So basically, I hit this button. They all kind of have a little bit of a tiny delay that you set in the entity, so it looks a little better and a little more realistic that they wouldn't all teleport at the same time. This next one is 4 target names per entity. I'm just going to skip through this because this takes a little bit more explanation. It's pretty powerful. It's pretty useful. But I'm not going to go through that in the video. Now this next one, Trigger Push Custom, The normal trigger push in in vanilla Quake will always play the wind fly sound, so it always sounds like you're in a wind tunnel. And there are hacks to where you can get rid of that, but I went ahead and created something that could be either silent or you can attach a sound to it. So listen carefully here. I've attached a sound to this trigger push. So it'll, as you're inside the volume, it creates that water sound. This is one of my favorite things, though. When I trigger this key, this trigger with a key, you're going to see the teleport effect on this shambler. And that's a tele_fog entity, and you could trigger that. Anyway, that's it for the gallery. This is the last room, and I'm not going to go over this. But again, take a look at the sample maps, and now I'm definitely not going to show you. So let's take a look at trigger spawned monsters. So each monster entity will have a new spawn flag that's included, and it's spawn flag 8, and it's called trigger spawn. What you do is you set that, and it'll require a trigger to spawn that monster. In this case, I have a trigger relay that sets up the spawn of each monster. One other thing you want to take a look at is the delay. Each monster will have a delay value, and you can set this to 5 seconds if you want it to, but I also have included some a drop down with some other selections. You don't have to do this. You can use 0, which means it'll spawn as soon as it's targeted, and then you've got 0.2 of a second, 0.3, and so on up to a second. But again, you can just type in whatever value you want here. There are 3 entities in this. One is play sound triggered, the other is play sound, and then ambient general is the third. Ambient general will just play a looping sound. So in this case, I've got the wind suck sound that you heard earlier when I was down in this area. And that is built into the original pack file. So I didn't have to have an external sound for this. I'm just calling an existing sound. The sounds must be in the sound folder, as it says here. And you can skip adding sound to this path. It'll automatically look in sound. But this is in a subfolder called ambience, and it's suck1.wave. Now this one's a little different. This is play sound, and what this does, you do not use a looped sound for this. You use a one-off sound, and there's a bunch of them in the game. So in this case, I used the Shub-Nigroth sight sound from the end map in the original game. What happens is you enter in this file name, and it'll just periodically and randomly play that sound. So it would be good for thunder or kind of creepy sounds like that, creaking wood, that type of thing. So getting back to play sound triggered, I've got the Shambler sight sound here, and it's just a trigger once, trigger that one-off sound. That's how this button is set up. It has a play sound triggered, and that is the blob sight sound. All these entities are pretty well documented in the FGD, so if you just kind of click on one, it should give you all the information you need. And same with the manual. There's all kinds of information in the manual, so I highly recommend reading this manual. So now, some of this information is not in the manual. So I want to get a player model into this little test map, a dead player, and I'll just put him over here to the side. In the model key, I'm going to put in Progs Player MDL. So now you can see that it's going to display the player model, and the origin of the model is sitting on the floor. So let's compile this and take a look and see what that looks like just as a default. So as you can see, he's kind of stuck in the floor. So each of the models has a different origin, slightly different origin. And someone smarter than I can probably figure out how to make this a little easier to use in the editor, but I'm not the guy for that. As you can see, we've got some miscellaneous models with those sprites animating here. But let's put this dead guy in here. So I'm going to close this down. I'm going to actually disconnect. I'm going to show you. So you're going to want to use the Quake Engine FTE because it has a built-in model viewer. So I'm going to type in model viewer, and then I'm going to type in the same path to the model. So Progs Player MDL. I'm not quite sure what causes this, but it's cycling through all the different skins, and it's kind of nice. It's dissolving between the two of them. So I haven't really read up on how you can disable that, but it doesn't really bother us now. I'm using the arrow keys to spin him around, and I can go arrow up and down to see him up, from a higher angle, pitch and yaw and all that jazz, right? So I'm just looking at the player model, and this is the default frame 1 that you saw, or frame 0, I should say, and that's up in the left-hand corner over here. So let's take a look through these frames. I'm going to hit page up until I get to a frame that I want to use. And it's coming pretty quickly here. I want to say it's what, 29? No, it's not that. It's 40 something. Okay, so he's falling down and he's dead. So there's a few frames of him laying there dead. And it looks like I was right about 49 is your last frame of him dead. So I'm going to use arrow keys just to kind of see it from above. Kind of spin him around. So let's put him in there. So let's use frame 49, which is up here. So I will disconnect. We're back in Trench Broom, and so basically what I'm going to do is type in frame and 49, and then we knew that this was a little too low, but I'm going to keep it, well, let's raise it up. Let's see. Let's raise it up 8 units. I'm going to raise that up 8 units, and oh, look, he's, we didn't raise it up enough. So maybe 32 units total off the ground. So let me just change the thing to 32, so we get a nice clean. Now he's levitating, so I went a little too high. All right, so it looks like 16 is what we want. So there you have it. I just noticed something that's missing from the FGD that I'll need to include in our future version. There's no angle key. Now, it's very important to distinguish between angle and angles. So an angle key is this kind of just basic rotation of the model. And that is what you use on, info player start. Change the angle, and that's 270, as you can see up here. So undo that. So that's angle without an S. So now what's the difference between angle and angles? Well, angles will control the yaw, pitch, and roll of the entity, not just the direction, the origin that it's facing to the world. So what we can do with this is you set angle to 0, and you must do this, by the way, if you're going to use the angles key with an S. And then I can just change, let's just say, let's pitch him up by, 45 degrees. So we've got a mishap here with our dead body. He's been tilted 45 degrees and his head's in the ground. So you can see how you've got to kind of experiment. You'll definitely want to take a look at some of the links down below where we're discussing this. There's a Discord channel specifically for Progs Dump that you can ask questions. But I think, if you take a look at the manual and you have some experience mapping, this should come together pretty quickly for you. That's it for this episode. Thanks for hanging in there and checking out Progs Dump. We'll see you in the next video.